Hello everybody, welcome to this little video about how to sew the Empty Hanger Patterns Fair Play top. This is the first full-length step-by-step video I've recorded. I hope you're going to enjoy it. And as you can see, we're starting right off with the first step of making the collar, which is gathering up your different collar pieces and just laying them out side by side to see what they look like. On my collar here, I have three pieces which are different than the other ones, and I'm going to try to put those at the back so that they'll be less visible because, of course, I ran out of fabric while cutting. By the way, in this video, if you notice that my hands look like unnaturally large compared to the pieces, it's not that I have freakishly big hands, although maybe I do. It's because this is actually a half-scale model. I printed the pattern at 50% because I thought that I would be able to make a top that fits my son. That kind of worked, but I'll talk more about that later. So here we are, laying out all of the pieces here. One other thing that you should try to overlook is that there's actually 13 wedges here. You're not supposed to have 13, that was a mistake. You're supposed to have 12. So anyway, taking the first two, lay them out next to each other, and then sewing them together along one of the sides there. And after you've sewn them together, you're going to be pressing that seam open. It's easier to press all of the seams open as you go. You can press it all at the end, but that's a little bit more difficult. After you've done the first one, the next step is just keep going until you've got all 12 of your wedges sewn together. And yes, you do need to sew together 12 of them, not 13. Once you've got all 12 of them sewn together, there is still 13 at this point, I haven't noticed yet, but anyway, I will, and I'll tell you when that is. Once you've got all 12 of them sewn together, you turn the collar into a loop, and you sew the last ones together so that you're completing your collar. And of course, press that seam open as well. When you've got all of them sewn together, this is what your collar looks like. At this point, you can fold it so that it looks like a collar. And you can play with it a little bit to see which side is more beautiful or less beautiful, which side you want to be the front or the back. Clearly I have those three which are different than the others. That's going to be my back. And this is the outside of my collar. The inside, as you can see, is hideously ugly, all different cuts. But the outside is not too bad, except for these three here. These three are going to be the back of my collar because hopefully you won't see them that much, especially on a child that runs around a lot. So this is what the collar will look like. Front, nice. That's going to be the back. So I'm going to go ahead and add a label on the inside of the back. And I only want to sew it to the inside layer. So I'm going to flip the outside of the collar out of the way so that I'm only sewing through one layer. And I'm going to attach that on. At this point, I've noticed that there's 13, and I took out one of the wedges between the videos. But anyway, now there's 12 wedges. My collar is sewn on, my label is sewn on. And I'm lining up the collar there, just making sure that all of the seams are still pressed in the right way. And where the label is, I know that that's going to be my center back. So I'm putting in a pin to mark the center back, and then I'm going to put in more pins to mark the center front, which is of course at the opposite part from the center back. And I'm also going to mark the sides, which are equidistant between the center back and the center front. One step that's not shown here is that after I mark the sides and the center back and the center front, you should baste around the outside of the collar to keep the raw edges together. That's not shown in this video here, but you definitely should do it. It makes it much easier to line it up in future steps. So now my collar is ready. I can put that away. And the next step is going to be assembling the shirt itself, so sewing the sleeves to the back and the front. Here's my back and my front. I've labeled them as well as the sleeves. I just wrote right on the fabric because my fabric is the same on the wrong side and the right side, so you can see it better this way when it's labeled. The back is at the top of the screen there, the front is at the bottom, and I'm going to lay out my sleeves, making sure that the back part of the sleeve is matched with the back of the garment and that the front is matched with the front. It's very easy to mess it up because the pieces are very similar, so be sure you've labeled it before you try sewing it together. And then we're just going to sew these 4 little short seams. After they're sewn, I'm going to press them open. As much as you can, yes, press them open. And after they've pressed open, I'm going to quarter the neckline. I can do this by lining up the seams and pressing a crease into the back and into the front. This is, by the way, a terrible ironing technique. You should not be wiggling your iron back and forth like that. I was doing it because this fabric was some sort of ridiculous scuba, but maybe not scuba, more something polyester, and it did not want to take a crease. So I was trying to force a crease into it with this wiggly iron technique. Not good ironing technique. Don't do it like that. And then when you match the front and the back, you can find the center of the sleeve. You can notice that the center of the sleeve is not equidistant between the 2 seams. It's a little bit more towards the front. But if you match up the front and the back, you'll be able to find that. So now you've added creases. That's going to help you match up the collar perfectly when you sew the collar in, which is going to be our next step. And now here's our collar. We have the quarters marked on the collar and we have the quarters marked on the shirt. Be sure that you're matching up the center back of your collar where the label is to the center back of your shirt. Oh, it looks good already. So I'm just going to match up these marks and then transfer my pins. For this one I'm only using 4 pins. You absolutely can use more if that makes you more comfortable. Doesn't really matter. Whatever makes it easier for you to sew. And then after you've put in as many pins as you want, at least 4, but more if you need, then you're going to sew all around the collar. So now we've sewn the collar in, and it's starting to look more and more like a real shirt. That's great. Let me put the back at the top so that it's on the screen right. And we'll just fold it in half to admire our nearly finished shirt. But let's move on to the next step. This is going to be pressing the hems and the cuffs before we sew the side seam. Here at the back and the front, we're just going to press 2 centimeters up, wrong sides together. Just press it in place and then unfold it again. This is just a single fold hem, 2 centimeters. At the cuff, at the sleeve, we're going to fold the cuff up. I'm working on the wrong side, so I'm going to make a 5 centimeter fold, first wrong sides together, and then 5 centimeters right sides together. And then press it in place. We're going to do this on both sleeves. After we've pressed the cuffs and the hems in place, we're going to sew up the side seams. So let's line up our shirt right sides together. Everything is unfolded, the cuffs and the hems, and we can sew from the cuff down to the hem in one go to close up the arm and sew the side seam. After that, we're going to clip into the seam, press it to opposite directions to reduce some bulk, and then we're just refolding it along the creases we made previously. This is the first fold. We're folding it wrong sides together in the first fold. And then after that, we're going to fold it right sides together inside the sleeve. And then we're going to sew all around close to the edge with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And after sewing up the cuff, this is what it looks like. We're going to pull it down. The seam allowance you can press either way. It depends a little bit on how bulky your fabric is. Usually it's easier to press it towards the sleeve. Let me show you what it looks like from the outside, from the right side. Looks like this. It looks like a standard cuff. The only difference is that on a pattern with separate cuff pieces, I always end up losing the cuffs. That's why I prefer this cut-on cuff. So for our very final step, we're going to be hemming. Just fold it up 2 centimeters again on your crease lines and go all around. I'm using a decorative stitch for mine, mostly because I was too lazy to change to red thread, and I thought it would look nice. And that's it. Your shirt is done. Check it out, my beautiful shirt that I made for my son. A little mini version here. I hope your shirts turn out as nice as mine did, this one at least. And that's it. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments or send me a message. And thank you for watching.